My ex-husband invited me to his wedding to humiliate me, then I walked in with his twins and shattered his entire world. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. The tinted window of the limousine offered a muted, cinematic view of the Chicago skyline. The glass towers gleamed like jagged teeth against the twilight sky, piercing the heavy gray clouds that promised a late winter storm. It was a view I knew intimately, but from a very different perspective. 10 years ago, I had looked up at these same buildings from the cracked pavement of Wacker Drive, shivering in a threadbare coat that offered no protection against the hawk, wondering if the wind off Lake Michigan would finally freeze the tears on my cheeks before they hit the ground. Today, I was observing them from the heated leather interior of a luxury car that cost more than the house I grew up in. I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue Oscar de la Renta gown. It felt cool and reassuring under my fingertips, a suit of armor made of silk and velvet that whispered power with every movement. Next to me sat the two reasons my heart was still beating, the two anchors that had kept me from drifting into the abyss all those years ago, Dean and Grant. My 10-year-old sons. They were adjusting their bow ties with a seriousness that made them look far older than their years. They were handsome, terrifyingly so. They possessed my dark hair and olive skin, but the jawline, the nose, the way they held their shoulders, that was all him. That was all Preston. It was like looking at a mirror of the man who had destroyed me, but reflected through a lens of innocence and kindness that Preston never possessed. "Mom," Dean whispered, his voice steady but his eyes darting toward the hotel entrance. "We're almost there. Are you okay? You're gripping your purse really hard." I looked at him, seeing the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. Dean was the quiet one, the observer, the one who calculated risks before taking a step. Grant, sitting on my other side, was the fire, the one who wore his heart on his sleeve and was currently trying to flatten a rebellious lock of hair. "I am better than okay, Dean," I said, forcing my fingers to relax. "I am ready." I looked down at the thick, cream-colored envelope resting on the leather seat beside me. It was the catalyst for this entire evening. A wedding invitation. Heavy cardstock, embossed gold lettering, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Mr. Preston Sterling and Miss Tiffany Miller request the honor of your presence." But it wasn't the formal invitation that had made my blood run cold and then boil with a rage I hadn't felt in a decade. It was the handwritten note on the back, scrawled in Preston's familiar, jagged script. He must have written it while laughing with his friends, drunk on his own ego. "Valerie, I thought you might enjoy seeing what real success looks like. Come if you can afford the bus fare. It should be quite an educational experience for you to see what you missed out on. Bring the kids if you must, I assume they've never seen a lobster before. P.S. He thought I was still the broken woman he had thrown out into the snow. He thought I was still scrubbing floors, living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in the poverty he had sentenced me to. He had no idea that the woman who received this invitation was Valerie Sterling, founder and CEO of Valerie's Elite, one of the premier event planning conglomerates in the country. He had no idea that I wasn't just a guest, I was a secret shareholder in the very hotel group hosting his wedding. The limo slowed to a halt in front of the Grand Belmont Hotel. The doorman, a man named Arthur whom I had helped with his daughter's tuition fees just last year, opened the door. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he composed himself, a professional smile gracing his face. "Welcome back, Ms. Sterling," Arthur said, bowing slightly lower than usual. "The grand ballroom is expecting you." "Thank you, Arthur," I replied, stepping out onto the red carpet. The flash of cameras went off nearby, likely for some local celebrity or politician, but a few lenses turned toward us, drawn by the magnetism of the boys and the aura of silent power we projected. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume, the scent of money and deception. I took Dean's hand on my left and Grant's on my right. We walked through the revolving doors, the golden light of the lobby washing over us. 10 years ago, security had escorted me out of this very lobby because I had loitered too long near the heaters, trying to warm my frozen hands after a cleaning shift. Tonight, the head concierge rushed forward, bypassing a line of check-ins to greet me. "Ms. Sterling, good evening. The Sterling Miller wedding reception has just begun. The cocktail hour in the atrium. Shall I announce you?" "No need," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "We prefer to make a quiet entrance. Surprise is half the gift, isn't it?" We walked toward the atrium. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses and the murmur of hundreds of guests. This was it. The Lion's Den. As we reached the top of the marble staircase overlooking the party, I scanned the crowd. It was a sea of tuxedos and designer dresses, the elite of Chicago's real estate and finance world. And there, in the center of it all, holding a glass of champagne like a scepter, was Preston. He looked older, his hair graying at the temples, but he still wore that expression of smug superiority that used to make me shrink into myself. He was laughing at something, his head thrown back, his hand resting possessively on the waist of a blonde woman who looked barely older than I was when he married me. Tiffany. She was glittering in diamonds that I knew were bought with money he had hidden from me. I tightened my grip on my son's hands. They didn't flinch. They stood tall, little soldiers in a war they didn't start but were about to finish. "Ready, boys?" I whispered. "Ready," Grant said, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the man who had abandoned us. We began our descent. The click of my heels on the marble echoed, cutting through the ambient noise. Heads began to turn. Conversations trailed off. It wasn't just the dress or the beauty of my children. It was the energy we carried. We didn't look like guests, we looked like Judgment Day. Preston must have sensed the shift in the room. He stopped laughing. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the staircase. When his gaze landed on me, I saw the confusion first. He squinted, as if trying to reconcile the memory of his ragged ex-wife with the vision descending toward him. Then, his eyes drifted down to the two boys flanking me. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. I reached the bottom of the stairs and walked straight up to him, stopping just outside of his personal space. The silence was deafening. "Hello, Preston," I said, my voice smooth as silk wrapped around a dagger. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about success?" "I'm here to learn." Hello everyone, if you are watching from Chicago or anywhere else in the world, thank you for joining me. Please leave a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. To understand the sheer magnitude of that moment in the Grand Belmont lobby, you have to understand the person I used to be. You have to strip away the designer gown, the CEO title, and the confidence. You have to go back 10 years, to a drafty townhouse in the suburbs, where the air always smelled of floor wax and my own desperation. It was October 2014. The wind was already howling through the streets of Chicago, stripping the trees bare and promising a brutal winter. Inside, I was sweating. I was 28 years old, and I was trying to cook the perfect ribeye steak. "Medium rare," I whispered to myself, watching the butter foam in the pan. Not medium. Not rare. Medium rare. Just how he likes it. I had spent my entire monthly grocery budget on these 2 steaks and a bottle of 1995 Bordeaux. I had skipped lunch for 3 weeks, eating only crackers and tap water, to afford the beeswax candles that were currently flickering on the dining room table. I wanted everything to be perfect. Tonight had to be perfect. I checked the clock. 6:45 p.m. Preston would be home in 15 minutes. I ran a hand through my hair, checking my reflection in the oven door. I looked tired. I always looked tired back then. I was a housewife, yes, but managing Preston's life was a full-time job that came with no salary, no vacation days, and constant, brutal performance reviews. He was a rising star in commercial real estate. He demanded a home that looked like a showroom and a wife who looked like a trophy but spoke like a servant. I tried so hard to be both. I loved him. Or, at least, I thought I did. I loved the idea of us. I loved the security I thought we had. I walked over to the small gift box sitting on the sideboard. Inside were a pair of tiny, knitted baby booties and a positive pregnancy test. My hand drifted to my stomach. I smiled, a genuine, terrifying bubble of joy rising in my chest. We had been trying for 2 years. Well, I had been trying. Preston had been allowing it to happen if it happens, always with a caveat about timing and finances, despite his hefty bonuses. But lately, he had been distant. Cold. He stayed late at the office every night. He smelled of different perfumes, subtle, expensive scents that weren't mine. I told myself it was work. I told myself he was stressed about the new development project downtown. I told myself a baby would fix it. A baby would make us a family again. It would remind him of the man who used to hold my hand during movies, not the man who checked my grocery receipts for unnecessary expenditures like brand-name detergent. The sound of the garage door opening made my heart jump into my throat. It was a visceral reaction, conditioned over years of criticism. Was the hallway clean? Was the mail sorted? Was the temperature in the house exactly 70 degrees? I quickly lit the last candle and smoothed my dress. It was an old dress, a blue floral print he used to like when we first started dating, but it felt tight now across my chest. The back door opened, and Preston walked in. He brought the cold air with him. He was handsome, in that sharp, predatory way. His suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly coiffed. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. "You left your shoes by the mat," he said. That was his greeting. Not hello. Not how was your day. Just a criticism. "I'm sorry, honey," I rushed to move them, my hands shaking slightly. "I was just rushing to get dinner ready." "Happy anniversary." He stopped. He looked at the table, set with the good china and the roses I had cut from the dying bush in the backyard because I couldn't afford a florist. He looked at the steak resting on the platter. He didn't smile. He sniffed the air, and his nose wrinkled. "It smells like garlic," he said, loosening his tie with a look of disgust. "You know I have a meeting with the Japanese investors tomorrow morning." "I can't smell like garlic, Valerie." "God, do you ever think? Or is that head of yours just for decoration?" The bubble of joy in my chest popped, replaced by the familiar sinking feeling of failure. I used rosemary, mostly," I stammered, wringing my hands. "And the wine, it's the vintage from our honeymoon. I saved for it." He walked past me, brushing my shoulder but not acknowledging my touch. He went to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and took a long swig, ignoring the expensive wine breathing on the table. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice he used when he was firing a contractor or negotiating a lower price on a property. It was his business voice. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter wind outside. I clutched the edge of the granite counter to steady myself. "Can we eat first?" I asked, my voice trembling. I have a surprise. A big one." "No," Preston said. He turned to face me, leaning against the island with his arms crossed. "We are not eating. And I don't want your surprise. Because the biggest surprise is how long I've managed to tolerate the charade of a marriage." He looked at me with eyes that were as cold and hard as the diamonds he sold to his clients. "Sit down, Valerie. You're going to want to be sitting for this." I didn't sit. I couldn't. I stood there, guarding my stomach, guarding the secret life growing inside me, as the man I loved prepared to shatter my world into a million jagged pieces. "I met someone," Preston said. He didn't say it with guilt. He didn't say it with shame. He said it with relief, like he was finally dropping a heavy bag of trash he'd been forced to carry for miles. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded. What? Tiffany, he continued, watching my reaction like a scientist observing a bug under a microscope. My new executive assistant. She's refreshing. She's ambitious. She understands the world I live in. She doesn't smell like garlic and floor wax. She wears Prada, Valerie. You wear whatever that is. He gestured vaguely at my dress, the one I had worn on our first date, the one I thought held sentimental value. The insult was so petty, so absurd, that I almost laughed. But the pain was slicing through me, sharp and visceral. Preston, we're married, I whispered, my voice barely audible. We took vows. In front of your parents. In front of God. Sickness and health. Richer or poorer. Vows, he scoffed, pushing off the counter and walking toward the living room. I was 24. I didn't know I was going to be a CEO. I didn't know I would outgrow you so fast. Look at you, Valerie. You're plain. You have no drive. You're content with this little suburban mediocrity. I need a partner, a power couple. Not a dependent who counts coupons. I gave up my career for you. I cried, the anger finally sparking through the shock. I worked 2 jobs to put you through business school. I paid for your first suit. You told me to stay home and manage the house because you wanted a traditional wife. And you did a mediocre job at that, too, he shot back, his voice rising. Pack your bags. I want you out tonight. Tonight? I looked at the window. The snow was no longer just fluttering, it was swirling in thick, white sheets against the glass. A blizzard warning had been issued an hour ago. Preston, it's a blizzard out there. I have nowhere to go. My family is in Ohio, you know I don't have money for a hotel. Not my problem, he said, pulling out his phone. Tiffany is coming over in an hour to help me redecorate the study. She has impeccable taste. I don't want you here when she arrives. It would be awkward. I felt dizzy. The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. I looked at the gift box on the sideboard. My last hope. My shield. I can't leave, I said, my voice gaining a sudden, desperate strength. Preston, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He froze, his thumb hovering over his phone screen. He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something, fear? Calculation? But it wasn't love. It definitely wasn't joy. He walked over to me, invading my personal space. He loomed over me, smelling of that expensive cologne that wasn't mine. Pregnant, he repeated. Yes, I breathed, tears spilling onto my cheeks. We're having a baby. We're going to be a family. Please, Preston. We can fix this. For the baby. Just give us a chance. He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. Then, he threw his head back and laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound that made my skin crawl. You really are pathetic, aren't you? He sneered. The oldest trick in the book. Boop's baby to trap the rich husband. How stupid do you think I am? It's not a trick. I reached for the test in the box. Look. It's positive. He slapped the box out of my hand. It skittered across the hardwood floor, sliding under the sofa. I don't care, he hissed, his face inches from mine. I don't want it. And frankly, I doubt it's mine. You spend a lot of time at the grocery store, Valerie. Maybe you're banging the butcher. He looks like your type. Blue collar. Simple. I gasped, slapping him across the face before I could stop myself. The sound was loud in the quiet house. He didn't hit me back. He just smiled, a terrifying, icy smile. "That was a mistake," he said softly. "Now I don't have to feel bad about the divorce settlement." He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He dragged me toward the front door. "Preston, stop. Please. It's your child. It's our baby," I screamed, trying to dig my heels into the carpet. He opened the front door. The wind howled, blowing snow into the hallway. He shoved me. I stumbled, falling onto the icy porch steps. The cold bit into my skin immediately, shocking my system. He threw my purse out after me. It landed in a snowbank. "You're nothing, Valerie," he said, standing in the warm glow of the hallway, looking down at me like I was garbage. "You came from nothing, you are nothing, and without me, you will be nothing. Don't contact me. My lawyer will be in touch. If you try to come back inside, I'll call the police and say you trespassed." "Preston!" I shrieked as he grabbed the handle. "I have nothing. Where am I supposed to go? I'm carrying your child." "You can't polish trash, Valerie," he said. "Go back to the gutter." And then he slammed the door. The sound of the lock turning echoed with a finality that shattered my heart. I sat there in the snow, wearing only a thin dress, clutching my stomach, realizing that the man I loved had just sentenced me and his unborn child to freeze. The next 4 months were a blur of gray skies and gnawing hunger. I didn't freeze that night. Mrs. Higgins across the street saw me shivering on the curb and called a cab that took me to a women's shelter, but a part of me died on those steps. The part of me that believed in fairy tales, in love, in the inherent goodness of people. That part froze to death, leaving behind something harder, colder. I ended up in a basement apartment on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't really an apartment, it was a converted storage room under an old laundromat. It had a single window that was positioned at street level, looking out onto a brick wall and a dumpster. Day and night, I watched shoes walk by. The rent was cheap, but the cost was high. The pipes rattled like dying ghosts, and the heating worked only when it felt like it. I learned quickly that Preston meant what he said. He didn't just leave me, he waged a legal war designed to starve me out. He had the best lawyers in the city. They sent me letters almost daily. They argued that I had been abusive, citing the slap. They argued that I had been financially irresponsible. They argued that I had been unfaithful, using his baseless accusations to freeze our joint accounts. I had no money for a retainer to hire a decent attorney. I was buried in legal paperwork I didn't understand, terrified of the threats of custody battles for a child that hadn't even been born yet. It was a twisted game. Preston claimed he didn't want the baby, yet his lawyers used the unborn child as a pawn to delay any alimony payments until paternity could be established after birth. I was drowning, but I couldn't sink. I had to eat. I found work. 3 jobs, actually. From 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., I washed dishes at a 24-hour diner. My hands, once manicured for Preston's corporate dinners, became raw and red from the scalding water and harsh industrial soap. The owner, a man named Sal, paid me in cash and let me take home the burnt toast and bacon scraps. From 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., I worked off the books at a dry cleaner. The chemical fumes made me dizzy. I spent hours pressing suits that looked just like Preston's, imagining the men wearing them were just as cruel. I wore a mask, praying the perchloroethylene wouldn't hurt the baby. In the evenings, I cleaned office buildings, the same kind of glass towers where Preston sat in his corner office, making deals worth millions. My belly grew. And then, at the 5-month ultrasound, which I paid for in cash, counting out crumpled singles at the clinic desk while the receptionist looked at me with pity, I found out the truth. 2 heartbeats, the technician said, smiling at me. You're having twins. I stared at the grainy monitor. 2. Not 1. 2. Panic and love crashed into me simultaneously. How was I going to feed 2 babies? I was barely feeding myself. My dinner that night was a can of soup I had bought from the discount bin at the grocery store because the label was torn. It was expired by 3 months, but it was food. I sat on the lumpy mattress on the floor of my basement, wrapping my thin coat around my legs. It was December now. The Chicago wind was brutal. The landlord had turned off the heat again to save money. "I'm sorry," I whispered to my belly, rubbing the tight skin. "I'm so sorry. You deserve better than this. You deserve a crib. You deserve warmth. You deserve a father who loves you." My phone rang. It was my mother in Ohio. I hadn't told her the full extent of my misery. I was too ashamed. "Valerie, honey, how are you?" she asked. "I'm fine, Mom," I lied, my voice cracking. "Preston and we're working through things. He's just stressed." I couldn't tell her. She was living on a fixed pension after Dad died. She couldn't help me financially, and telling her would only break her heart. "Well, send my love to Preston," she said. I hung up and curled into a ball. The hunger was a physical pain, a sharp cramp in my stomach. But worse was the fear. The fear that Preston was right. That I was nothing. That I couldn't survive on my own. That night, I saw a rat scurry across the floor. It stopped and looked at me, twitching its nose. I didn't even scream. I just watched it, feeling a strange kinship with the creature. We were both just trying to survive in the dark, unwanted and hunted. But as I felt a flutter in my stomach, a kick, strong and demanding, something shifted in me. One of the babies was waking up. "No," I said to the dark room. My voice was raspy, but it was steady. "He said I was trash. He said I was nothing. But I am your mother. And I will not let you be nothing." I didn't know how, but I knew I had to fight. Not for me. For them. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day. The irony was not lost on me as I pushed the heavy cleaning cart down the hallway of the Meridian Plaza. While the rest of the city was exchanging chocolates, roses, and diamond earrings, I was scrubbing toilets on the 30th floor. I was 34 weeks pregnant. My back felt like it was breaking. My ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, straining against the cheap sneakers I had bought at a thrift store. But I needed the shift. The overtime pay would cover the deposit for the hospital. I didn't have insurance anymore. Preston had removed me from his policy the day the divorce was finalized, claiming clerical error that his lawyers dragged out for months. I was wiping down a mirror, staring at my gaunt reflection, when the pain hit. It wasn't a cramp. It was a thunderclap in my lower back that buckled my knees. I grabbed the sink, gasping. Water gushed down my legs, soaking my uniform pants. "No," I whimpered, terror flooding my veins. "Not yet. It's too early. Please, God, not yet." Another wave of pain hit, stronger this time. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor. I was alone. The building was empty except for security in the lobby, 30 floors down. I fumbled for my phone. My fingers were shaking so hard I dropped it twice. I dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. No signal in the interior bathroom. Panic clawed at my throat. I dragged myself out into the hallway, leaving a wet trail behind me. "Help!" I screamed, but my voice was weak. I looked at the phone again. 1 bar. I dialed the only number I knew by heart, the number I had sworn never to call. Preston. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. I prayed he would answer. I prayed for a shred of humanity. "Hello?" It wasn't Preston. It was a woman's voice. High-pitched. Giggly. Tiffany. Preston? I gasped. It's Valerie. Please. I'm in labor. I'm at the meridian. I need help. The babies are coming. I can't reach 911. There was a pause. I heard clinking glasses in the background. Smooth jazz music. Laughter. The sounds of a life I used to have. Oh, it's the ex-wife, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with disdain. Preston is in the shower. We're getting ready for dinner at Le Bernardin. Do you have any idea how rude it is to call on Valentine's Day? Tiffany, please, I sobbed, another contraction tearing through me, making my vision blur. I'm dying. The babies, they're too early. I have no money for the ambulance, please tell him. Not our problem, Tiffany said, echoing Preston's words from months ago. Stop begging. It's pathetic. And frankly, we don't care about your little bastards. And she hung up. I stared at the phone, the silence buzzing in my ears. They truly wanted me dead. They wanted us dead. I screamed, a primal sound of rage and agony. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I wouldn't die on this floor. I dragged myself toward the elevator. I smashed the button with my fist. When the doors opened, I crawled inside. By the time the security guard found me in the lobby, I was barely conscious. The next few hours were a kaleidoscope of bright lights, sirens, and doctors shouting. Fetal distress. Emergency C-section. Multiples. Where is the father? No father on record. I woke up in a recovery room that smelled of antiseptic. My body felt light, empty. Terror seized me. My babies, I croaked. Where are my babies? A nurse appeared, her face kind. They're in the NICU, honey. They're small, but they're fighters. She wheeled me in to see them. Dean and Grant. They were tiny, covered in wires, their chests rising and falling rapidly inside the incubators. They looked so fragile. Their skin was translucent. I pressed my hand against the glass. I promise you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I promise you, I will build a world where no one can ever hurt you again. I will make him pay for every tear, every moment of cold, every second of hunger. You are not nothing. You are everything. My sister, Monica, arrived the next morning. She had driven all night from Ohio the moment the hospital called her contact number. She walked in, took one look at me, gaunt, pale, bruised, and burst into tears. I'm here, Val, she said, hugging me carefully. I brought my savings. It's not much, just my rainy day fund, but we'll figure this out. You aren't alone anymore. I looked at my sister, then at my sons. The fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard determination. The old Valerie died in that hallway. The new Valerie was born in the fire of pain. And she was going to burn Preston Sterling to the ground. Survival is a powerful motivator. But revenge? Revenge is rocket fuel. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have capital. I didn't have investors. I had a tiny kitchen in a new, slightly better apartment Monica helped me rent, one that was above ground, and I had a skill Preston had always mocked: I could cook. I started small. I noticed that the construction workers building the new condos down the street, ironically, a competitor's project to one of Preston's buildings, had nowhere to eat lunch except the overpriced gas station hot dogs. So, I made sandwiches. Thick, hearty sandwiches on homemade bread, packed with roasted vegetables and meats I seasoned with the same care I used to waste on Preston. I strapped Dean to my chest and Grant to my back in a double carrier I found at a garage sale. I walked to the construction site with a cooler. $5, I told the foreman, a burly man named Big Mike. Homemade. Hot. Better than anything you'll get at the 7-Eleven. He looked at me, a disheveled woman with dark circles under her eyes and two babies attached to her like barnacles, and laughed. All right, sweetheart. Let's see what you got. If it sucks, I ain't paying. He took one bite of the roast beef with horseradish cream and caramelized onions. He stopped chewing. He looked at me, then at the sandwich, then back at me. I'll take 10 for the crew, he said. Right now. That was the first $50 of the Valerie Sterling empire. Word spread. Big Mike told the electricians. The electricians told the architects. Soon, I was making 50 lunches a day. Then the office workers from the building next door wanted in. Then the lawyers from the firm across the street. My kitchen became a factory. Monica moved in to help. We worked in shifts. The apartment always smelled of yeast and roasting garlic, the smell Preston had hated. Now, it was the smell of money. It was the smell of freedom. It wasn't easy. I slept 3 hours a night. My feet were permanently swollen. I had to dodge the health inspector because I didn't have a commercial license yet. I had to juggle breastfeeding twins while kneading dough. There were nights when Dean had a fever and Grant wouldn't stop crying, and I had an order for 100 box lunches due at 6 a.m. I would cry into the flour, wishing for just 5 minutes of silence, wishing I had a partner. But then I would look at the picture of Preston I had cut out of Crane's Chicago business magazine and taped to the fridge. He was smiling, holding a shovel at a groundbreaking ceremony, looking like the king of the world. Just you wait, I would whisper to the paper. Enjoy your throne, Preston. Because I'm coming for the crown. By the time the twins were 2, Valerie's kitchen had moved out of the apartment and into a small storefront. We weren't just doing lunch anymore. We were doing catering. Small parties. Office birthdays. I learned the business the hard way. I learned about inventory, profit margins, and overhead costs. I read business books at the public library while the boys played in the children's section. I learned that being nice didn't get you paid, but being indispensable did. I was building something. Brick by brick. Sandwich by sandwich. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's wife. I wasn't anyone's victim. I was the boss. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday in November. We had been hired to cater a last-minute luncheon for a real estate firm downtown. It wasn't Preston's firm, thank God, but it was a major competitor. Gable and Associates. The head of the firm was Mrs. Eleanor Gable. She was a legend in Chicago real estate. A woman who had built a skyscraper empire in a man's world. She was known to be ruthless, exacting, and terrifying. I was setting up the buffet when she walked in. She was 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a suit that cost more than my delivery van. She surveyed the food with a critical eye. She picked up a tartlet, wild mushroom and truffle oil. She took a bite. I held my breath. My staff held their breath. She looked at me. Her eyes were like lasers. Who made this? She asked. I did, ma'am, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Is there a problem? The crust is handmade, she stated, not asked. Yes. Butter and leaf lard. It's the only way to get the flake. She nodded, a microscopic movement. You undercharged us. Excuse me? She pulled the invoice out of her pocket. This bill. For the quality of this food, and the speed of the service, you are charging 40% below market rate. Are you bad at math, or do you just hate making money? I flushed. I'm trying to be competitive. I'm a small business. I wanted to secure the contract. You're a foolish business if you undervalue your product, she snapped. Then, she looked closer at me. You look familiar. Did you used to work at the Meridian? I froze. I used to clean floors there. A long time ago. She raised an eyebrow. From cleaning floors to making the best mushroom tart in Chicago. That is a story I want to hear. She sat down. Pour me a coffee. Talk to me. And don't give me the PR version. That conversation changed my life. I told her everything. Not the emotional sob story, but the business reality. I told her about the struggle, the twins, the vision I had for a high-end event company that focused on storytelling through food and atmosphere. Mrs. Gable listened. She didn't offer pity. She offered a partnership. I have a charity gala next month, she said. The mayor will be there. The governor. Everyone who matters. My usual planner is a bore. He does shrimp cocktails and string quartets. I want you to do it. Mrs. Gable, I can't, I gasped. That's a 500-person event. I have a staff of 3. I don't have the capital for the ingredients, the linens, the staff. She pulled out a checkbook. She wrote a number that made my knees weak. This is an investment, she said, handing it to me. In exchange for 10% equity in your company. If you screw this up, I will destroy you. If you succeed, I will make you rich. Do we have a deal? I looked at the check. I looked at Mrs. Gable. I thought of Preston calling me nothing. Deal, I said, shaking her hand. That gala was a war zone. I didn't sleep for 4 days. I micromanaged every detail. But when the night ended, the mayor was asking for my card, and the governor's wife was raving about the dessert. Mrs. Gable came up to me as the waiters were clearing the tables. You did good, kid, she said. Now, go change your company name. Valerie's Kitchen sounds like a hobby. You need a name that sounds like an empire. That night, Valerie's Elite was born. And with it, the countdown to Preston's destruction began. Success paints a target on your back. As my company grew, so did the whispers. Chicago is a big city, but the circle of high society power players is small. By the time the twins were 7, Valerie's Elite was the company for luxury weddings and corporate events. But with visibility came scrutiny. Rumors started circulating. Nasty ones. That I had slept my way to the top. That my food was sourced from cheap vendors. That my finances were shaky. I knew where they were coming from. I had seen Tiffany at a few charity luncheons. She always looked at me with a mix of fear and hatred. She was still with Preston, though they hadn't married yet. Preston was notoriously gun-shy about marriage after the trauma of our divorce. They were trying to sabotage me. One of my vendors suddenly canceled a huge flower order for a wedding the day before the event. I found out later Preston's firm had bought out the florist's entire stock for a corporate lobby refresh just to spite me. I had to fly in flowers from Miami overnight, costing me thousands, but the wedding was saved. But they didn't just target me. They targeted the boys. Dean and Grant attended a private school, the same one Preston's friends sent their kids to. I worked hard to pay that tuition because I wanted them to have the best. Mom, Grant said one day, coming home with a bruised eye and a ripped blazer. What happened? I asked, dropping my bag and rushing to him. Jason Miller pushed me, Grant said, trying not to cry. He said his dad told him you're a gold digger. And that my dad hates us. He said my dad thinks we were a mistake. My heart broke. I pulled him onto my lap, though he was getting too big for it. Grant, look at me, I said, holding his face. People say mean things when they are threatened. They are threatened because we are strong. We built this life, just the 3 of us. We don't need anyone else to validate us. Do you understand? But why doesn't he love us? Grant asked, the eternal question. Because he doesn't know how to love anything he can't control, I said honestly. And you, my sons, are uncontrollable. You are wild and brilliant and kind. He is too small to hold love that big. I went to the office the next day and called a staff meeting. We are under attack, I told my team, which had grown to 50 people. Someone wants us to fail. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to be flawless. We are going to be so good that they can't ignore us. We are going to kill them with excellence. I worked harder. I expanded to New York. I secured exclusive contracts with the city's top venues. And all the while, I kept a file. A thick, black file in my safe. Every time I heard a rumor, every time Preston's firm cut a corner, every time I found a discrepancy in the old paperwork about my divorce settlement, I put it in the file. Mrs. Gable helped me. She had connections everywhere. She found out that Preston was hiding assets in offshore accounts. She found out he was inflating the value of his properties to get loans. I wasn't just building a business. I was building an arsenal. And then, the invitation came. The wedding. Preston and Tiffany were finally making it official. And in his arrogance, in his supreme, blind confidence, he thought it would be funny to invite the ex-wife he thought he had destroyed. He handed me the match. He didn't know I was already holding the gasoline. 10 years is a long time. It's long enough for a cell to regenerate, for a sapling to become a tree, and for a broken woman to become a titan. By the time the twins turned 10, Valerie's Elite wasn't just a company, it was a standard. We had offices in Chicago, New York, and were breaking ground in London. I had moved us out of the small apartment and into a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a space filled with light, modern art, and the kind of quiet luxury I used to think was reserved for people born into money, not people who clawed their way to it. But my favorite view wasn't the lake. It was watching my sons grow. Dean and Grant were 10, but they possessed the souls of much older men. They had seen me struggle, even if I tried to hide it. They had seen the late nights, the stress, the way I checked the locks on the doors 3 times before bed. They were identical in looks, Preston's dark hair, his sharp jawline that was already defining their young faces, but their spirits were distinct. Dean was the strategist. He loved chess, mathematics, and building complex Lego structures that followed strict architectural rules. He had his father's logical mind, but without the cruelty. Grant was the artist. He wrote stories, rescued injured birds, and could sense a shift in my mood before I even spoke. He had my heart. One evening, about a month before the invitation arrived, we were sitting on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline. I was drinking tea, the boys were finishing their homework. "Mom," Dean said, not looking up from his math tablet. "Why do we have his last name?" I froze. We rarely spoke about Preston. I had never lied to them, but I had offered them the truth in age-appropriate doses. "Sterling?" I asked, setting my cup down. "Because it's your name, Dean. It belongs to you as much as it belongs to him." Jason Miller at school said his dad told him that Mr. Sterling is going to be a billionaire soon, Dean continued, his voice void of emotion, purely analytical. He said Mr. Sterling is building the new stadium complex. "Is that true?" "He is," I admitted. "He is a very successful builder." "But he's a bad man," Grant interjected, looking up with fierce eyes. "He left us in the snow." "You told us." "I told you he made a choice," I corrected gently. "He chose a life that didn't include us. And because of that choice, we built our own life. A better one." Dean put his tablet down. He looked at me with an intensity that made me shiver. It was Preston's stare, but softened by love. "Does he know?" Dean asked. "Know what, honey? Does he know that I won the state math Olympiad? Does he know Grant got published in the Youth Literary Journal? Does he know we exist? The pain of that question was like a physical blow. I walked over and knelt in front of them, taking their hands. He knows you exist, Dean. But he doesn't know you. He doesn't know that you hate mushrooms or that Grant sleeps with a nightlight. He gave up the privilege of knowing those things. I don't want him to know, Grant said, his voice trembling. I don't want him to come back. He isn't coming back, I promised, squeezing their hands. We are safe. We are a fortress, remember? The three of us. The Musketeers, Dean said, a small smile touching his lips. Exactly. The Musketeers. But as I looked at them, I knew the questions were getting harder. They were approaching adolescence. They were grappling with the void where a father should be. I had filled that void with love, with education, with travel, but I couldn't change biology. They carried his DNA. And I lived in constant, low-level fear that one day, that DNA would manifest as something other than jawlines and math skills. I feared they would feel inadequate because of his rejection. I feared they would think they weren't enough. Little did I know, Preston was about to give them the answer to their questions in the most brutal way possible. He was about to show them exactly who he was, and in doing so, he would free them from the ghost of what if. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It didn't come through the mail. It was hand-delivered by a courier to my office reception. Priority package for Miss Sterling, the receptionist, a bright girl named Sarah, had said, handing me the thick, cream envelope. It looks fancy. Another gala invite? I took it, feeling the weight of the cardstock. My thumb brushed over the return address embossed in gold leaf PS and TM. My heart stopped. PS Preston Sterling. TM Tiffany Miller. I walked into my office and closed the door, my hands trembling slightly. Why now? After 10 years of silence, of legal battles, of pretending I was dead, why now? I opened it. The scent of his cologne wafted out, sandalwood and arrogance. Mr. Preston Sterling and Miss Tiffany Miller request the honor of your presence at their marriage. Grand Belmont Hotel. June 15th, black tie. And then, the note on the back. The note that changed everything. Valerie, I thought you might enjoy seeing what real success looks like. Come if you can afford the bus fare. It should be quite an educational experience for you to see what you missed out on. Bring the kids if you must, I assume they've never seen a lobster before. P.S. I sat down, staring at the words. Bus fare. Lobster. He truly believed I was still destitute. He believed I was still the woman he threw out. He hadn't bothered to check. In his mind, I was frozen in time, a perpetual victim. But why invite me? Why take the risk? Then it hit me. He wasn't taking a risk. He was taking a victory lap. I knew from Mrs. Gable that Preston's recent projects were leveraging him to the hilt. He needed to project an image of absolute invincibility to secure his investors. Marrying Tiffany, whose father was a major financier, was a business merger as much as a wedding. Inviting me was the final power move. He wanted to parade his broken ex-wife in front of his new life to show everyone how far he had risen above his mistake. He wanted to show Tiffany that he had upgraded. He wanted to show me that I was nothing. It was the act of a narcissist who had gone unchallenged for too long. I picked up the phone and called Monica. He invited me, I said when she answered. To what? A funeral? Please tell me it's his funeral, Monica quipped. His wedding. To Tiffany. Silence on the other end. Then, that sick son of a. Valerie, burn it. Don't you dare go. He just wants to hurt you. He wrote a note, Monica. He made a joke about the boys never seeing a lobster. I'm going to kill him, Monica growled. I am going to drive to his office and... No, I interrupted, a cold calm settling over me. We aren't going to kill him. We're going to accept. Valerie, why? Why put yourself through that? Because he thinks he invited a victim, I said, looking out at the city skyline, at the empire I had built. He has no idea he just invited the executioner. He wants to show off his success? Fine. I'll show him mine. But more importantly, I'm going to show him his sons. The boys? Monica sounded horrified. Valerie, that's dangerous. It could traumatize them. They asked me yesterday if he knows they exist, I said softly. They need to see him, Monica. They need to see him not as a mythical monster or a lost hero, but as a man. A small, petty, pathetic man. They need to see that we are the prize he lost, not the burden he discarded. And what about you? She asked. Are you ready to see him? I looked at my reflection in the glass of my office window. The woman staring back wasn't the girl in the floral dress. She wore Armani. She commanded a room. She had scars, yes, but they were covered in armor. I've been ready for 10 years, I said. He wants an educational experience? I'm going to give him a master class. I didn't just RSVP. I began a war campaign. The first step was Mrs. Gable. I invited her to lunch at the most exclusive club in the city, a club where I was a member and Preston was still on the waiting list. Eleanor, I said, sliding the invitation across the table. I'm going. Mrs. Gable picked up the card, read the note, and let out a sharp, unladylike snort. The man is a fool. A dangerous, arrogant fool. You know his financials are a house of cards, don't you? I suspected, I said. But I need proof. Mrs. Gable smiled, a shark-like grin. My dear, I have been waiting for you to ask. You know that development deal on the waterfront? The one he stole from me last year? Yes. He didn't steal it. I let him have it. Because I knew the soil samples were contaminated. He bribed the environmental inspector to overlook it. And he used funds from your old joint trust, the one he claimed was empty during the divorce, to pay the bribe. I felt the blood rush in my ears. The trust? The one for our future home? The very same. He drained it 3 days before he kicked you out. He hid it in a shell company. That money legally belongs to you and the boys. And the bribe? That's a federal offense. Do you have the paper trail? I have everything, Mrs. Gable said, tapping her manicured nails on the table. Bank transfers, emails, the inspector's confession. I was saving it for a rainy day. But a wedding seems like a much more festive occasion to drop a bomb, don't you think? I want him destroyed, Eleanor. Not just embarrassed. I want him to lose everything he built on the lies he told about me. Then we need one more thing, she said. Paternity. He denied the boys were his, correct? Yes. He put it in the court filings. Said I was unfaithful. We need a DNA test. Irrefutable proof. Not for the court, we have enough for that, but for the theater of it. For the audience. I have their DNA, obviously. But I need his. Mrs. Gable winked. Leave that to me. He drinks at my husband's golf club. A discarded scotch glass is all we need. The next 3 weeks were a flurry of activity. I hired a private forensic accountant to organize Mrs. Gable's evidence into a digestible format. I hired a stylist to find the dress, the Oscar de la Renta that screamed old money. I hired a bespoke tailor for Dean and Grant. I sat the boys down a week before the wedding. We are going to a party, I told them. A wedding. It is, your father's wedding. They went still. Grant reached for Dean's hand. Why? Dean asked. Because he invited us. He thinks we are poor. He thinks we are sad. He wants to laugh at us. That's mean, Grant said. It is. But we are going to go there, and we are going to show him that we are strong. We are going to walk in with our heads held high. We aren't going to make a scene. We are just going to let the truth do the work. Can you do that? Can you be brave for me? Dean looked at me, his jaw setting in that familiar way. I want to see his face when he sees us. You will, I promised. And he will see yours. The night before the wedding, Mrs. Gable called me. The DNA results are back, she said. 99.999%. Obviously. And I've forwarded the financial evidence to a contact at the FBI. They were very interested. They might be crashing the reception. Perfect, I said. One more thing, Valerie, Mrs. Gable said, her voice softening. Be careful. A cornered rat bites. And he is about to be very, very cornered. Let him bite, I said. I have teeth now too. Returning to the moment on the staircase. The silence in the atrium was absolute. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the hundreds of guests. The jazz band had trailed off into an awkward silence. All eyes were on the tableau at the foot of the stairs, the billionaire groom, pale and shaking, the bride, confused and angry, and the ex-wife, resplendent in midnight blue, flanked by two miniature versions of the groom. I stood just close enough to smell the alcohol on Preston's breath. Up close, I could see the cracks in his facade. The sweat beading on his upper lip. The way his eyes darted from Dean to Grant, unable to hold their gaze. Hello, Preston, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Valerie, he choked out. It was barely a whisper. What? How? You sent an invitation, I said, reaching into my clutch and pulling out the cream envelope. I held it up for the room to see. With such a lovely personal note. Come if you can afford the bus fare. Well, the limo was a bit more comfortable, but thank you for the concern. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw business partners exchanging glances. I saw Tiffany's father, Mr. Miller, frown deeply. Who are you? Tiffany demanded, stepping forward. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the tension. She looked at my dress, then at hers. She realized in that instant that she was outclassed. And who are these children? I turned to her. I didn't hate her. She was just another victim, really. Another accessory Preston had acquired. Hello, Tiffany. I'm Valerie. The nothing that Preston threw out 10 years ago. I put a hand on my son's shoulders. And these are Dean and Grant. I looked back at Preston. Your sons. No, Preston stammered, his voice rising in panic. No, that's impossible. I told you. I told everyone, they aren't mine. Preston, I said, my voice dropping to a register of dangerous calm. Look at them. Dean stepped forward. He didn't look like a child in that moment. He looked like a judge. Hello, Dean said. You have the same nose as me. And Grant. And you twitch your left eye when you're nervous. I do that too. The crowd gasped. The resemblance was undeniable. It was biological plagiarism. Get them out of here! Preston shouted, his composure shattering. He motioned for security. This woman is crazy. She's a stalker. She's crashing my wedding. 2 security guards started to move toward us. But before they could reach us, a voice boomed from the balcony above. Touch her, and you'll be looking for new jobs by morning. It was Mrs. Gable. She stood by the railing, holding a glass of scotch, looking like a queen surveying an execution. Mrs. Gable? Preston looked up, terrified. Eleanor, this woman, Mrs. Gable announced, her voice projecting to every corner of the room, is Valerie Sterling, CEO of Valerie's Elite. My business partner. And the owner of a significant portion of the preferred stock in this hotel chain. The silence broke. The room erupted into whispers. CEO? Partner? Stockholder? Preston looked at me, his eyes bulging. CEO? You? But you were a maid. I said, stepping closer. And then I became a mother. And then I became a shark. You told me I couldn't polish trash, Preston. You were right. I couldn't polish you. So I polished myself. I saw the realization hit him. The dress. The limo. The confidence. It wasn't a facade. It was real. And it was terrifying him. Valerie, he hissed, lowering his voice, trying to regain control. What are you doing? Why are you doing this here? We can talk. We can cut a deal. Just leave. Please. You're ruining everything. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Preston, I said, smiling sweetly. I'm just here for the educational experience you promised me. Tiffany grabbed Preston's arm. What is she talking about, Preston? You said she was a psycho living in a trailer park. You said the kids weren't yours. They aren't. Preston insisted, though his voice lacked any conviction. She's lying. She's trying to get money. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. Money? Preston, my company's quarterly revenue is higher than your entire net worth. I don't need your money. But. I walked over to the bandstand and picked up the microphone. The feedback squealed for a second, silencing the room again. But, I continued, my voice amplified now, reaching every ear. I do think it's time to clear up a few misconceptions. 10 years ago, Preston Sterling threw me out into a blizzard because I was pregnant. He told me I was nothing. He told me to go back to the gutter. I looked at the crowd. I made eye contact with the bankers, the lawyers, the socialites. He abandoned his children before they were even born. He claimed they weren't his so he wouldn't have to pay child support. He left us to starve. Literally. Lies. Preston screamed. She's lying. Am I? I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. This is a DNA test, conducted by the premier lab in Chicago. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Would anyone like to see it? Mr. Miller? I extended the paper toward Tiffany's father. He walked forward, his face grim. He took the paper, put on his reading glasses, and scanned it. He looked up at Preston. The look of disgust on his face was absolute. You lied to me, Mr. Miller said. You told me you had no dependents. You told me your ex-wife was a cheat. She is. The test is fake. Preston was sweating profusely now. The test was ordered by me, Mrs. Gable said from the balcony. And verified by my legal team. Mr. Miller threw the paper at Preston's feet. You abandoned your own sons? Twins? It was complicated. Preston pleaded. I was young. I was building a career. You were a coward, Grant said. He hadn't used the microphone, but his voice carried. He was standing next to me, tears in his eyes, but his chin was high. We waited for you. When we were little, we waited. But you never came. That broke the room. I heard a woman sob. I saw men shaking their heads. Tiffany stepped back from Preston as if he were radioactive. You abandoned a pregnant woman? In a blizzard? Tiffany, baby, listen. Don't touch me, she hissed. She looked at me, then at the boys. She saw the resemblance. She saw the pain. And to her credit, she saw the truth. I can't marry you, she said, her voice shaking. I can't marry a monster. Tiffany, think about the merger. The stadium deal. Preston grabbed her hand. Is that all this is? She ripped her hand away. A deal? Valerie, Preston turned to me, his eyes wild. You happy now? You broke us up. Is that what you wanted? You want me back? Is that it? You still love me? I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. Love you? I asked incredulously. Preston, I pity you. I look at you and I don't see a powerful CEO. I see a sad, lonely man who built a castle on a foundation of lies. I don't want you. I wouldn't take you if you were the last man on earth and I was on fire. Then why are you here? He screamed. To vindicate my sons, I said. And to make sure you never hurt anyone else again. You think this is over? Preston sneered, trying to rally, trying to find some leverage. So what? I have a past. Everyone does. I'm still the developer of the waterfront project. I still have the city in my pocket. You can't touch me, Valerie. You're just a party planner. Actually, Mrs. Gable's voice cut in again as she descended the stairs. About the waterfront project. She walked up to us, her presence commanding. She stood next to me, a united front. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Gable addressed Tiffany's father. I believe you are the primary investor in Preston's new stadium deal, correct? I am, Mr. Miller said warily. Or I was. You might want to see these, she handed him a thick file. These are the soil sample reports Preston suppressed. The land is toxic. Heavy metals. It will cost millions to clean up before a single brick is laid. He knew. He bribed the inspector. What? Preston went pale. That's proprietary information. It's criminal evidence, Mrs. Gable corrected. And here, she handed another file to the man standing next to Mr. Miller, a banker I recognized. These are the records of the trust fund he looted 10 years ago. Money that belonged to Valerie. He used it to pay the bribe and to fund the initial deposit on this hotel booking. The room gasped. He had paid for his wedding to his mistress using money stolen from his wife. You stole my money? I asked, looking at him. The money for our house? It was my money. Preston yelled. I earned it. It was a joint trust, Preston, I said. That's grand larceny. Mr. Miller looked up from the file, his face red with rage. You committed fraud? You took my investment money for a project you knew was dead in the water? It's not dead. I can fix it. I'm pulling my funding, Mr. Miller declared. Effective immediately. And I'm suing you for breach of contract and misrepresentation. Me too, the banker said. The bank is freezing your lines of credit, Preston. Pending an investigation. Preston looked around the room. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. The investors were on their phones. The socialites were whispering. The respect he craved was gone, replaced by disgust. Eleanor, please, Preston begged Mrs. Gable. We're friends. Don't do this. We aren't friends, Preston, she said coldly. I do business with men of honor. You are a thief who abandons children. Valerie, he turned to me, desperation clawing at his throat. Valerie, stop them. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. I'll. I'll pay you back. I'll give you custody. I'll give you whatever you want. I already have custody, I said. And I don't want your money. I want justice. You're ruining my life. No, Preston, I said, stepping closer so only he could hear. You ruined your life 10 years ago when you closed that door. This is just the bill coming due. As if on cue, the heavy double doors of the atrium swung open. But it wasn't catering staff. 4 men in suits walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. The lead man flashed a badge. FBI. We're looking for Preston Sterling. The room went silent. Even the ice sculptures seemed to hold their breath. Preston stumbled back, knocking over a flower arrangement. No. No, no, no. Mr. Sterling, the agent said, walking up to him. We have a warrant for your arrest. Wire fraud, embezzlement, bribery of a public official, and tax evasion. You can't arrest me here. Preston shrieked. It's my wedding day. Actually, Tiffany interjected, taking off her diamond engagement ring. It's not. She threw the ring at him. It bounced off his chest and landed near the shattered champagne glass. I'm done, Tiffany said. I'm not going down with you. The officers moved in. They grabbed Preston's arms. He struggled, his dignity completely gone. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I'm Preston Sterling. You have the right to remain silent, the officer droned, snapping the handcuffs on. The sound of the metal clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Valerie! Preston screamed as they dragged him toward the doors. Valerie, help me. Think of the kids. You can't let their father go to jail. I covered Dean and Grant's ears, but they pulled my hands away. We want to watch, Dean said firmly. I looked at Preston, thrashing like a trapped animal. Their father isn't going to jail, I called out to him. Their father never existed. You're just a donor, Preston. And a bad investment. He was hauled out through the lobby, past the staring guests, past the cameras that were undoubtedly flashing outside. The king of Chicago real estate, dragged out in disgrace. The room was still for a moment. Then, slowly, conversation resumed. But the tone was different. It wasn't fearful anymore. It was the sound of a community excising a tumor. Mr. Miller walked up to me. He looked tired. Miss Sterling, he said. I owe you an apology. And a thank you. You saved my daughter from a terrible mistake. And you saved me a lot of money. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. But you're welcome. Tiffany stood nearby, crying mascara tears. I walked over to her. I reached into my purse and handed her a tissue. He would have done to you what he did to me, I said gently. You got out lucky. She looked at me, looked at the boys, and nodded. Thank you. I turned to my sons. Are you okay? Dean looked at the door where Preston had vanished. He was smaller than I thought he would be. Yeah, Grant agreed. He looked weak. He is, I said. Come on. Let's go get burgers. I think we're done with lobsters. 6 months later, the dust had settled, but the landscape of our lives had changed forever. Preston pleaded guilty. With the mountain of evidence Mrs. Gable and I provided, he had no choice. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. His assets were seized and liquidated to pay back the investors he defrauded. But there was a separate civil judgment. The court ruled that he had indeed hidden assets during our divorce. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly followed the news coverage of the wedding arrest, awarded me full repayment of the trust fund, plus interest, plus punitive damages for emotional distress. It came to nearly $4 million. I didn't keep it. I didn't want his tainted money buying my groceries or my shoes. I used it to start the Sterling Foundation, using the boy's name, not his. It was a scholarship and grant fund for single mothers trying to start their own businesses. I wanted to make sure no other woman had to scrub toilets while pregnant just to survive. One afternoon, a letter arrived at my office. It had the stamp of the federal penitentiary. Valerie. I have a lot of time to think in here. I think about that night in the snow. I think about the boys. I saw their picture in the paper when they won the science fair. They look like me. I know I have no right to ask, but please, tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I wasn't always like this. Maybe one day, they can visit? I want to know them. Preston. I sat with the letter for a long time. The old Valerie might have felt guilt. She might have thought about forgiveness for the sake of the children. But I respected my sons too much to make that choice for them. That evening, I put the letter on the dining table. A letter came from Preston, I told them. He is in prison. He says he is sorry. He wants to know if you want to visit. Dean and Grant looked at the letter. They didn't touch it. Dean looked at Grant. They had a silent conversation that only twins can have. No, Dean said. Why? I asked. Because he only wants us now because he has nothing else, Grant said, his wisdom piercing my heart. He's lonely. He's not sorry. He's just alone. We have a family, Dean added. We don't need to visit a stranger in jail. Are you sure? Yes, they said in unison. I took the letter. I walked over to the fireplace. I lit a match that reminded me of the candles I lit 10 years ago for that doomed anniversary dinner. I dropped the match onto the paper. We watched it curl into ash. Okay, I said. Subject closed. Who wants ice cream? Life didn't just go on, it bloomed. Valerie's elite expanded to Paris. I was traveling, working, living a life bigger than I had ever dreamed. And then I met Mark. Mark wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a billionaire. He was a pediatric surgeon I met at a charity event for the hospital. He had kind eyes, rough hands, and he drove a Volvo. He didn't try to impress me with money. He impressed me by listening. He impressed me by treating Dean and Grant not as baggage, but as people. Our first date wasn't at a Michelin-star restaurant. It was a picnic in the park. He brought sandwiches. They were terrible, soggy bread, too much mustard, but he had made them himself. I'm nervous, he admitted, wiping mustard off his thumb. You're intimidating. In a good way. I'm just a mom, I smiled, eating the soggy sandwich. Who likes mustard? We took it slow. I was guarded. My heart had scar tissue inches thick. But Mark was patient. He showed up. He came to soccer games. He helped with math homework, which Dean appreciated, as Mark was actually good at calculus. 2 years after the wedding disaster, on a quiet beach in Florida during a family vacation, Mark knelt down. Not in front of me, but in front of the boys. I love your mom, he told them. And I think you guys are pretty cool, too. I want to ask her to marry me. But you guys were here first. So, I'm asking for your permission. Dean and Grant looked at each other. They smiled. Only if you promise not to cook sandwiches, Grant joked. Deal, Mark laughed. He stood up and looked at me. He held out a ring. It wasn't a massive diamond like the one Preston had bought to show off to his friends. It was a vintage sapphire, deep blue like the ocean, like the dress I wore the night I reclaimed my life. Valerie, he said. Will you build a life with me? I looked at him. I looked at my sons. I looked at the horizon. Yes, I said. Yes. Tonight, I am standing on the balcony of our home. The winter wind is blowing off Lake Michigan, but I am not cold. The fire is roaring inside. I can hear Mark laughing with the boys, they are arguing about a movie. The smell of rosemary roast beef is wafting from the kitchen. I cooked it tonight. For a long time, I couldn't cook it. It reminded me too much of that night. But I reclaimed that, too. Now, it's just dinner. I look at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a concrete cell, Preston is sleeping on a cot. He has nothing. He is nothing. But I don't feel hate anymore. Hate takes energy. Hate is a tether. I cut that tether the night I walked out of the Grand Belmont. I think about the woman I was 10 years ago. The woman shivering in the snow. I want to reach back through time and hug her. I want to tell her, it's going to be okay. You are stronger than you know. The pain is just the chisel carving you into a masterpiece. They tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed. To every woman listening to this, to every person who has been told they are nothing, who has been discarded, betrayed, or left in the cold. Don't let them define your story. Their cruelty is not your destiny. It is your fuel. Take the bricks they threw at you and build a castle. Take the silence they left you with and fill it with your own voice. Preston invited me to his wedding to humiliate me. Instead, he gave me the stage for my greatest victory. He thought he was the hero of the story. He didn't realize he was just the villain who creates the hero. My name is Valerie Sterling. I am a mother. I am a CEO. I am a survivor. And I am everything. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch, or if you're in the middle of that fight right now, please leave a comment. You are not alone. You are powerful. And your best chapter is yet to be written. Good night. As Valerie's story closes, it leaves us with an undeniable truth: resilience is born not from perfection, but from the ashes of hardship. Her journey reminds us that even in our darkest moments, when the world seems to crumble around us, we hold the power to rebuild. Strength is not about avoiding pain, it's about transforming it into purpose, about using every scar as a stepping stone toward a brighter future. Valerie's triumph is a testament to the unyielding human spirit and the boundless capacity to rise above betrayal, rejection, and adversity. This story also challenges us to redefine success, not as wealth or status, but as the courage to reclaim our worth, to protect what matters most, and to stand tall in the face of those who seek to diminish us. It teaches us that the greatest victories are not about revenge, but about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Valerie's strength, her love for her children, and her refusal to let cruelty dictate her destiny are lessons for all of us. What about you? How do you define your resilience? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story inspired you. Let's celebrate the power of growth and the promise of better days ahead.